Now welcome to another battle of the heroes and villains, where this time it is Dedra Meero's turn to be ranked against the other characters of Andor. We haven't got outside Andor yet, but eventually we will do characters not from that show. But anyway, let's get right to the results, where we will see that 52% of people think that she belongs in the S tier, 41% said A tier, 5% then went B, 1% gave her a C, 0% D, though there was a 1 vote, it just didn't round up to anything. And then there was a final 1% that gave her an F. And so when we do all the math here and consider S a score of 5 and F a score of 0, Dedra ends up with a score of 4.43, which puts her into second place, again, of the Battle of Andor characters, though eventually I promise, or I think, we will get to characters beyond Andor, and if you want to see either more Andor characters or non-Andor characters, what you do is you take to the comments below. I will have a pinned comment down there asking for a character name. You give me the name if it gets the most votes, and by votes I mean most thumbs up. That will be the character we do next, and you get about a 24-hour period before I will post the next poll. Anyway, let's move right to the comments because there were a ton of really good ones. It was a pleasure to get to read through them all, and there were 500 and some comments overall, which sometimes when there are a ton of them, that just delays the arrival of these videos. I have to find a big chunk of time to just sit there and read through all of them and then tally up all the votes as well. I do want to get into the habit or rhythm of one of these a week and doing them on the weekend, but it won't always work out that way. But anyway, let's get to those comments, but not before just once again very quickly taking a moment to say thank you to everybody who leaves them or who takes the time to simply vote with a single letter or who watches these or any of my videos across both channels. Thank you so much for all of it, as well as a huge thank you to those who support the channel over on Patreon. And if you want to do that, you get access to my Discord server. $1 a month gets you access to my Discord server, and then you can come talk some Star Wars with everybody else or myself personally. We every Thursday night, though it'll be Tuesday this week, we do all voice chat where anybody and everybody is welcome to come and talk to me about Star Wars or anything else we end up talking about. All right, and on to it now. The top rated comment this time came to us from the last 3 brain cells, who said, I cannot tell you how good it felt to have a competent Imperial who is written like a real person instead of a two-dimensional caricature. And I agree 100%. It is so nice to have a character that has some nuance, that isn't just evil because they're evil or want to take over the galaxy because it's the cool thing to do. And yes, that can work at sometimes. We don't always need to dive in and explore every nook and cranny of their backstory and make them sympathetic villains and all of that. Sometimes it can just work to have a bad guy who's just bad. But I would have to say, overall, this is the best villain of the Disney era, or who has been created in the Disney era. I don't even know that it's close. The next best one that I can think of off the top of my head is maybe Moff Gideon from The Mandalorian, until season 3 turned him into the classic I do bad things because I'm a bad guy and I like to have clones of myself to take over the galaxy or whatever his plan was. There's also Krennic, who's also a part of Andor, and I think Andor makes him a better character than he just was in Rogue One, though he's fine in Rogue One as well. It's going to be interesting when we vote or rate him someday. But beyond that, especially when it comes to the shows and movies, I don't really know who would be the best villain of the Disney era of Star Wars. Again, it's just nice to have a character that has some nuance, that actually feels like, as you say, a real person, and you can understand and even sympathize a bit with her, which is going to bring us to this next comment, which comes to us from David Hill, who said, Dedra did what I would have thought impossible. Got me to sympathize with an Imperial who's dedicated to the Empire. She's competent, driven, and sympathetic. When she uses the Emperor's new directives to show the coordination between rebel cells and wins a public victory against Blevin, you can't help but kind of cheer for her, only to be reminded an episode later what an absolute monster she is. Well written, fantastically acted, and a villain we love to hate, but still can feel bad for. Dedra is a top-tier character. Well said, and I do agree that one of the things that makes her very interesting and such a great character is that you do kind of find yourself rooting for her. You kind of find yourself relating to her to at least some degree. I'm sure we've all had that job where we feel undervalued or we just want to prove ourselves and no one is listening, and those around us are putting us down or doubting us, or you're doubting yourself, and you know you're right, you know you're the right person for the job, and you finally prove yourself. But in this case, you prove yourself by, as you say, being a monster, being a horrible person. But again, there is something you sympathize with. There is something you understand about her, which is what makes a villain really good sometimes. Again, you can have the crazy, I'm totally evil for the sake of evil and I want to destroy the galaxy or take it over, or conquer, whatever they want to do. The mustache twirling villain, as they are often referred to. But there is something special when you can see yourself in the villain as well, when you can understand why they have become the way they are, the sympathetic villain, where there is a part of you in them where you could actually see yourself becoming them under different circumstances. And that's going to lead us right into our next comment that comes to us from A. Olive, who said, the perfect counter for Luthen. What makes her interesting is that, unlike Vader or Palpatine, she didn't choose the system she grew up in. So, in that respect, she's a victim of fascism. On the other hand, she is responsible for unspeakable horrors and deserves to be in that cell the rest of her life. Dedra's story shows that there are no winners with the dark side, only losers. And I do think there's this very, very fine line between being the victim of circumstances in life in general, being born into just a terrible situation and what you become because of it, and choosing to be the villain. And I do think there always is a choice. There is always a choice for everybody to do the right thing or to do the wrong thing. That is one of the things I take away from Vader's story or Anakin's story, that even after a lifetime of terrible decision making, he made the right choice in the end. But it's not always easy to see that you're on the wrong side, perhaps, which we discussed a lot in the video for Cyril, how he's a good person trying to do the right thing. He's just way on the wrong side. He's working for the Empire and doesn't realize that all of the things he's doing, especially when he gets to Gorman, are in service of a terrible, terrible regime and is going to result in a terrible tragedy. And I know a lot of times people say that they would have known better, they would have seen that they were on the wrong side or made a better choice at some point in history. We could go back to, say, Germany in the 1930s or 40s. I always hear people say, if I had been there, I wouldn't have sided with the in crowd, if you will. I would have made a different choice. I would have been better. But you can't know that for sure. I think we are very much shaped by the world around us and what we think is normal, what we are told is normal, or what we assume is normal based on what we see everybody else around us doing. Maybe the person you are today would go back in time and be a better person at certain points in history because of the world that you grew up in and you realize that these things are wrong. But at the time, and I'm not defending people throughout history who have done bad things, but there is this thing called context. And the context around Dedra was she grew up in an Imperial orphanage. She probably right away joined the Empire as soon as she possibly could, even if she had a choice to join them or not. They probably kind of ushered her into that role. And so you kind of do feel bad for her, even though, yes, she's very much in the wrong and doing horrible, horrible things. But again, you kind of root for her. You kind of can see yourself in her. You can kind of understand, if I had been in that circumstance, maybe I turn out the exact same way. Who knows? All right, now we move along to this comment from Liam O'Dowell, who said, easy. Genuinely well written, terrifying female antagonist. She doesn't come off as a girl boss archetype, but still effectively wields both the hammer and the scalpel of the Empire while being self-determined and still comes up short in other ways. Well-rounded character, sympathetic villain, flawless visual design. That sneer is a really good look. And when it comes to modern Star Wars female characters, I'd quote her, "The very worst thing you could do right now is bore me." And yeah, on a little side note here, there is, or has been, it's kind of died down recently, I would say, but there's always been this since Disney took over and Rey became the main protagonist of the sequel trilogy and perhaps wasn't very well written. There has been many who say that the Star Wars fandom is full of misogynists who hate women and don't want them in their Star Wars. And what it really comes down to, and Dedra perhaps proves it better than any other character, save Leia and maybe Padme, and some of the others, Mara Jade, there have been a lot of actually beloved female characters in Star Wars, but the more well-known ones, like Leia and such, have proved before, and Dedra proves again, that Star Wars fans just want good characters. It's that simple. Nobody hated Rey because she was a woman. Maybe some people, yes, I'm sure there were a few out there, but in general, it wasn't that she was a woman that made some fans hate her. It was just that she was a bad character, and when one is well written, we're gonna love her, period. All right, and as I like to do, let's get to some of the less than positive comments, and there really weren't many of them. In fact, most of the comments I gave her an F, and there were actually several of them, but the problem is, and I've said this before, if you give a character an F and simply say in your comment, I'm giving her an F because everything Disney Star Wars is terrible, I'm not going to count that because you're not judging the character. You are just judging Disney Star Wars. You're condemning Disney Star Wars, which you're free to do. But we're here to judge characters, not to condemn Disney Star Wars. Anyway, there was this B tier comment from formerly Duck who said, "She's great, but alongside the entire cast of Andor, she doesn't stand out in my mind as much. However, I did find it impactful how, after all was said and done, her story perfectly mirrored Cyril's. Yes, she was stronger and more cutthroat, but she was, in turn, rejected by the government for stepping out of line to try and protect that same government. The only real difference between Cyril and Dedra is that Cyril is ultimately a selfless person, while Dedra is truly selfish, not that the distinction made a difference in their shared fate under the Empire." And I agree, and I think that's a great observation, putting it in the context of Star Wars and talking about selfless versus selfish, as I always do ad nauseum, I know. But you could certainly argue that Cyril is a selfless person, that he is doing it for a greater good. Again, he just doesn't realize the greater good he's doing it for is really, really bad, while Dedra, I think, understands what is going on with the Empire. She is fully aware, especially when it comes to the Gorman Massacre. She does have her reservations about it here and there, don't get me wrong, but she is out for herself. You can see it when they have their kind of final confrontation, and Dedra is saying, "We're going to go back to Coruscant as heroes. You just got to do this one last thing. You got to suck it up and realize we did some bad stuff. But now we get to go home and celebrate and enjoy the rewards of our deviousness." While Cyril cannot handle that, that broke Cyril. He's like, "Nope, I can't be this person. I thought I was someone else. I thought I was working for the good guys. I thought I was good, but it turns out I've been on the wrong side the whole time." And then, of course, he sees Castian, and we have that great moment. But either way, fantastic comment. I know you're only giving her a B, but I think you actually argued for her getting a higher grade. But either way, great comment. And that's really going to be the only negative-ish comment I get into. Some of the other ones simply said something along the lines of, we should reserve the S tier for characters like Darth Vader and Obi-Wan. And I've kind of gone into this before, and I understand that perspective. I understand and agree there should be a select few. However, if we only reserve it for, say, Obi-Wan, Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker, if we're only going to allow the characters who have been around for a very, very long time and have earned that place, certainly, I think we're doing this list a disservice, because a brand new character can come out and maybe not have the lineage, the 50 years behind them like Darth Vader does, but they can come out and certainly make an impact on the franchise that can be beloved by the fans or really enjoyed for one reason or another, like Dedra is here, that she made a hell of an impact in a hell of a show called Andor. So we should recognize that even if she hasn't been around for decades, we can recognize the greatness of a brand new character and put them from time to time. Again, I think it should be very few who make the S tier, but we can put them alongside the ranks of Darth Vader and Obi-Wan and the others. But ultimately, that choice is up to you. It is always up to you what criteria you want to use to judge the characters, just as long as you are judging the characters. Like I said, if you say, "F Disney, I hate everything they've done," and you give Dedra an F, well, I'm not going to count your vote because you're not rating the character. But as long as you are judging the character, do as you will. All right, well, I think that is going to be all I got for you this time. Now it is your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think about Dedra. Is she an S tier character, or maybe an A or something less? Or you can always vote for the character we do next. You just got to respond to my pinned comment down there with a character name, or vote with a thumbs up if the one you'd like to see is already listed. Again, in the next 24 hours or so, a new poll should be up, and there should be a link to my polls in the comments, or description below, I should say. Either way, leave your comments somewhere. Let's talk some Star Wars, and until next time, thanks for watching.